All right, let's dive into something maybe a little unexpected today. We're tackling the Central Bureau of Investigation, the CBI.
The CBI.
Yeah. Now, you might be thinking, okay, bureaucracy, files,
Yeah.
this is going to be a bit dry,
Yeah.
but stick with us. It's actually way more interesting than you might think. It's like India's version of the FBI.
It really is. And they handle a wild range of cases,
Yeah.
everything from those big corruption scandals that just rock the whole country
Yeah.
to these really complex financial crimes that actually, they touch all of our lives in one way or another.
They do. And even art heists.
Oh, yeah. Those are fascinating.
Those grab the headlines.
Yeah.
And especially for those of you out there who are prepping for the UPSC exam,
Absolutely.
this is a must listen.
Yeah.
Because you got to understand the CBI, not just to ace those polity questions,
Yeah.
but to really grasp how this institution, impacts every single Indian citizen.
Yeah. It's about understanding the system, the power dynamics, how they uphold the law, but then also how that intersects with politics. It's fascinating.
And speaking of power, the CBI, it didn't come about directly from some big act of parliament or anything. It was actually born in 1963 out of this older law, the Delhi Special Police Establishment Act.
1946, yeah.
46. Now, that's a little bit of a trivia nugget right there that could even trip up some seasoned UPSC folks.
Oh, yeah.
What's the significance of that, though, like legally speaking?
Well, the fact that it gets its power from this older act, instead of having its own legislation, it really raises some questions about how independent the CBI really is. How vulnerable is it to outside pressure? It's something that even legal scholars in the Supreme Court have really been debating for years.
That's a good point. And through all of this, the CBI has this motto, right? Industry, impartiality, and integrity.
Big words, right?
Big words. But do those values really line up with how the CBI actually operates? Especially with all the scrutiny and the controversies that seem to follow them.
Yeah, those are some pretty high ideals. And to figure out how they actually play out in the real world, I think we got to look at how the CBI is structured.
Okay.
They've got 7 main divisions.
Okay.
Each one tackles a different type of crime. But instead of just rattling off a list, I think it'd be more interesting to zoom in on one that really shows how multifaceted the CBI is.
Okay. Which one?
The Economic Offenses Division.
Okay, economic offenses. That sounds, I don't know, a bit technical.
Yeah,
What kind of cases are we talking about?
think about those huge financial scams that just shake up the stock market.
Yeah.
Those intricate money laundering schemes that go across borders. Companies dodging taxes.
Right.
These crimes, they may not be as dramatic, as a violent crime.
Yeah.
But they can be absolutely devastating to the economy, and that ends up affecting everyday people.
Yeah. It's a different kind of battlefield, right?
It is.
Where it's the financial experts, the forensic accountants, they're the ones on the front lines. And I can see how this would be so crucial for the UPSC exam. It ties in economics, law, even international relations.
Absolutely. And to really understand it, let's look at a real-world example. Remember the Satyam scandal?
Of course, back in 2009.
Yeah,
Huge accounting fraud. Brought down a major IT company. It was everywhere.
exactly. And the CBI, they were key to untangling this massive web of lies, exposing those financial manipulations, bringing those responsible to justice. It just goes to show how skilled the CBI is at tackling these complex economic crimes.
It's a powerful example. It really shows that the CBI isn't just about chasing criminals. They're about protecting our economic well-being, upholding ethical business practices.
Absolutely. It's about restoring that public trust.
Yeah.
When these big corporations, powerful people are held accountable, it sends a message, right? No one is above the law.
Absolutely. Now, all this talk about investigations and justice, it reminds me of another part of the CBI that sounds kind of, intriguing.
Yeah.
The Special Crimes Division. Just the name itself.
I know.
It sounds like a spy thriller or something. What kind of cases end up there?
Well, imagine those cases that you see splashed across the headlines, big murder mysteries that stump the local police.
Yeah.
Kidnappings with these really strange motives,
Yeah.
crimes that cross international borders. Those are the ones that the CBI's special skills and resources are made for.
So they're the elite team, like the special ops,
Yeah,
called in when things get really serious. The pressure must be immense.
it is.
But you mentioned that international angle, crimes crossing borders. How does the CBI handle that kind of complexity?
That's where Interpol comes in. The CBI works closely with them, acting as this crucial link between Indian law enforcement and this whole global crime-fighting network. They share information, coordinate investigations, even work on extraditing criminals.
So they're not just working within India. It's a global operation.
It is.
And this is where it gets really interesting, I think, for our UPSC folks. Because the person leading all of this, the CBI director, how they're chosen, how they're appointed, that's a pretty big deal, right?
Oh, yeah. It's a whole process designed to make sure the CDI stays independent, to shield them as much as possible from political influence. You've got this high-powered committee, includes the Prime Minister, the Leader of the Opposition, even the Chief Justice of India. They all have to agree to recommend the director.
So there are safeguards built in right from the start. But we've all heard stories, right, about political interference in the CBI's work. How does this system, with all this emphasis on consensus in these top-level appointments, how does it really address those concerns?
That's the million-dollar question, and it's still being debated. The selection process is meant to protect the CBI's autonomy, but there are always those concerns about, indirect pressure, things happening behind the scenes. The CBI has had times where people questioned their impartiality, which led to legal battles and a lot of public scrutiny.
It sounds like they're always walking a tightrope, balancing that mandate to uphold the law with the reality of political pressure and what the public expects.
It is a balancing act, and that's what makes the CBI such a fascinating, crucial institution to really understand. It's like a microcosm of India's democracy, with all its complexity, its challenges, its hopes.
That's a great way to put it. And speaking of complexity, there's another layer to all of this.
Yeah.
The relationship between the CBI and the state police.
Right.
It's like a jurisdictional puzzle.
It is.
Figuring out who gets to handle which case.
And that puzzle often leads to friction, especially when you have these high-profile cases that overlap, or disagreements about who's got jurisdiction. Don't forget, the CBI, they're focused on issues that involve the central government. State police, they handle things within their own states.
Yeah.
But sometimes those lines get blurry.
They do.
And then you get tension, even a sense of competition.
Yeah. Can you give us an example of, how this might play out in the real world? When the CBI and state police force might clash?
Okay, picture this. A big financial scam. It starts in one state, but it spreads to others. Maybe even involves officials in the central government.
Oh, yeah.
That's a recipe for a jurisdictional tug of war. The CBI wants control. The state police wants control.
Sounds like it could get messy.
It can, if there's no coordination, no communication. That's why clear rules and a spirit of cooperation are so important. Ideally, they should be working together, combining their strengths, their resources to make sure the investigation is thorough.
Yeah.
But getting to that level of collaboration, it's not always easy, especially when you add politics into the mix.
Right. It's a reminder that even in law enforcement, those human dynamics, egos, political maneuvering, they all play a part. It's fascinating.
It is. And it reminds us that to truly understand the CBI, you got to look beyond just the textbook definitions, the laws. It's about those nuances, the human element, the constant push and pull between, the ideals and the reality.
And for those UPSC aspirants out there, that nuanced understanding, that's what they need to really analyze these complex scenarios and develop strong arguments.
Right.
It's not just about knowing the facts, it's about the context,
Right.
the motivations, the potential for conflict, but also for cooperation.
Exactly. And speaking of getting a deeper understanding, let's talk about where these crime-fighting heroes get their training.
Okay.
The CBI Academy, it's in Ghaziabad. It's where aspiring officers hone their skills, learn the ins and outs of investigation.
The CBI Academy. It sounds intense. What kind of training do they get? How does it prepare them for all the things we've been talking about?
Oh, it's comprehensive. Everything from forensic science and how to conduct an interrogation to cybercrime and financial investigation. They offer short courses for experienced officers so they can brush up on specific skills.
Right.
But they also have these long-term basic courses for the new recruits.
Oh, wow.
It's like a constant learning process.
So it's not just about being physically fit, knowing how to fight. It's about giving them the intellectual tools, the analytical skills to tackle these really complicated crimes in a world that's constantly changing.
Absolutely. The CBI gets it. Criminals are always adapting. They're using new technology, finding ways to avoid getting caught. So the academy has to stay ahead of the curve, right?
Yeah.
Anticipate new challenges, make sure officers are ready for anything.
It's like this constant game of cat and mouse.
It is.
Both sides trying to outsmart each other.
Exactly.
And as technology gets more advanced, that playing field just gets more complex.
It does. That's why the CBI Academy is always updating what they teach.
Yeah.
They're incorporating the latest tech, providing training in specialized areas like cybercrime and digital forensics.
That's really interesting to think about how crime fighting itself is changing and how the CBI is keeping up. But I'm curious about the people involved, too.
Yeah.
What kind of person is drawn to a career in the CBI? What makes them tick? What qualities do they need to succeed in a field that's so demanding and often so controversial?
That's a great question, and that's something we're going to dive into even deeper in the next part of our discussion. We're going to explore what makes a successful CBI officer, what ethical dilemmas they wrestle with, and the personal sacrifices they often have to make in their pursuit of justice.
Okay, I'm already intrigued. So for our listeners, stick around. We've got a lot more to unpack. We'll get into some real-life cases, and we'll tackle the controversies that have really shaped the CBI's history.
You know, when we think about the CBI, we often focus on those high-stakes investigations, the courtroom dramas. But there's so much more to their work than just catching criminals.
Right. We talked about how they help to maintain economic stability, but there's another crucial aspect that we haven't really explored yet, their fight against corruption.
Exactly. Corruption, it's like a termite infestation. It just eats away at the foundations of our institutions, undermines public trust. And that's where the CBI's anti-corruption division comes in. They're the ones tasked with tackling this problem head on.
So for our UPSC listeners out there, this division is super important, right? Because it links directly to things like governance, accountability, ethical conduct in public service.
Absolutely. Understanding how the CBI investigates bribery, misuse of power, all these different forms of corruption, that's key to understanding the challenges of keeping our government clean and making sure that those resources are being used for the benefit of the people.
And let's be honest, the CBI's own motto, industry, impartiality, and integrity, has been put to the test again and again when it comes to these corruption investigations. I mean, we've all heard those stories, haven't we? About political interference, pressure tactics, accusations of selective targeting. How does the CBI navigate these really murky waters?
It's a delicate balancing act, there's no doubt about that. On the one hand, they have to be fearless, they have to be independent, pursuing those investigations wherever the evidence leads, regardless of who might be implicated. But on the other hand, they operate within a political system, so there's always that potential for pressure from those in power.
So it's a constant struggle to maintain that balance, right? Between upholding the law and navigating those political sensitivities.
It really is. And that's why everything the CBI does is under such intense scrutiny. It's debated. It's often challenged in the courts. There have been times when people have accused the CBI of being a tool for political vendettas, and then other times when they've been praised for their courage in taking on powerful figures.
So it's a mixed bag. There are no easy answers. It seems like the public perception of the CBI often swings between admiration and suspicion.
That's exactly right. And that's why it's so important to analyze the CBI's work with a critical eye, to look beyond just the headlines, to examine the evidence, the legal precedents, the systemic challenges they're up against.
Now, let's shift gears for a moment and imagine a hypothetical scenario. Let's say a state government is dealing with a really complex case. Maybe it's a massive financial fraud or a string of high-profile murders that all seem to be connected somehow. They need help. They need expertise that goes beyond what their local police force can handle. How would they go about requesting the CBI's assistance?
That's a really good question, and it highlights those jurisdictional complexities that we were talking about earlier. A state government can formally request the CBI to get involved in a case, especially when it's something of a significant public importance or if there's a suspicion that it extends beyond state borders, maybe even has international implications.
So it's not as simple as just picking up the phone and saying, hey, CBI, we need you guys. There's a formal process involved.
Exactly. There are protocols, legal frameworks, consent mechanisms. All of that needs to be followed. The CBI can't just waltz into a state and take over an investigation. They need the cooperation and the consent of that state government.
It makes sense. It's about respecting that federal structure, ensuring that there's a clear division of powers. But I imagine those collaborations can sometimes be a little bit, well, let's just say challenging.
You're absolutely right. Different agencies, they have different ways of working, different priorities, sometimes even different levels of resources. It takes strong leadership, clear communication, and a real shared commitment to justice to make those collaborations work smoothly.
It's like a delicate dance, isn't it? Trying to get two very different partners to move in sync. But when it works, when it clicks, it can be incredibly effective, right?
Yeah.
Combining the CBI's specialized expertise with the local knowledge and on-the-ground support of the state police.
Exactly. When the CBI and the state police can work together effectively, everyone benefits, especially the victims who are seeking justice and the citizens who depend on a law enforcement system that works, a system that's accountable.
Now I have to ask, with all of the cases that the CBI has handled over the years, were there any that stand out as particularly remarkable, maybe even groundbreaking, in terms of the investigative techniques used or the legal precedents that were set?
Oh, choosing the coolest case is tough because the CBI has such a rich history filled with these fascinating investigations, each one with its own twists and turns. But instead of focusing on one specific case, I think what's truly amazing is the way the CBI has constantly adapted to this ever-changing landscape of crime.
That's a great point. We often hear about those headline-grabbing cases, but the CBI's work goes far beyond just those high-profile investigations. They're constantly dealing with these emerging threats, new technologies, criminal tactics that are constantly evolving.
Exactly. And that's why their training, their expertise, their ability to adapt is so crucial. Whether they're dealing with cybercrime, economic fraud, even environmental violations, the CBI is always evolving to meet the challenges of a changing world.
And that adaptability, that's something our UPSC aspirants should really pay attention to. It's not enough to just memorize the structure and functions of the CBI. It's about understanding how this organization is constantly evolving to meet new challenges and protect our nation's interests.
I completely agree. The history of the CBI is proof that crime never stays the same. It's this constant back and forth, and the CBI needs to be agile, innovative, and absolutely relentless in its pursuit of justice.
And speaking of innovation, we can't ignore the elephant in the room, technology. How is the CBI using technology to improve its investigative capabilities and stay one step ahead of those tech-savvy criminals?
That's a key part of their evolution. They're incorporating all the latest forensic tools, using data analytics to spot patterns and trends in criminal activity, and they're even exploring the potential of artificial intelligence to predict and even prevent crime.
So it's not just about good old-fashioned detective work anymore. It's about embracing technology, using data, taking a more proactive approach to law enforcement.
That's right. And that requires a new set of skills, a different way of thinking, and a willingness to embrace new ideas and adapt to this rapidly changing technological landscape. And the CBI Academy is key in this transformation. They're training officers on the latest technology, promoting a culture of innovation.
It's amazing to see how technology is transforming crime fighting.
Hmm.
But there's a potential downside to all of this too, right? Privacy concerns, ethical dilemmas, the possibility of misusing that technology. These are things that the CBI has to grapple with as it adopts these new tools and techniques.
Absolutely. That's why it's so important to have these open conversations about the ethical implications of technology, to have clear guidelines, and to make sure that the CBI is transparent and accountable in everything they do. It's about striking that balance between using the power of technology to enhance security while still protecting individual rights and freedoms.
It's a good reminder that even as technology advances, those core principles of justice, fairness, and accountability, they can't be forgotten. They have to be the foundation of law enforcement. And for our UPSC folks listening, understanding these ethical considerations, that's crucial for analyzing the CBI's role in this world where technology is changing so rapidly.
Exactly. It's not just about knowing how the technology works. It's about understanding its impact on society, the good and the bad, and the ethical framework that should guide its use.
So far, we've talked a lot about the external challenges the CBI faces. Political pressure, jurisdictional disputes, the changing nature of crime. But what about the challenges they face internally? What are some of the issues they come up with in their own ranks?
That's a really important point. Like any large organization, the CBI has its own internal dynamics, power structures, and its own set of challenges. One issue that comes up repeatedly is the need to maintain a high level of professionalism and integrity among its own officers.
So it's not just about catching the bad guys out there. It's about making sure there are no bad apples within the CBI itself.
Exactly. And that's why things like internal accountability, transparency in promotions, and having clear mechanisms for addressing complaints and grievances, those are all so important for maintaining public trust and making sure that the CBI lives up to its own motto.
It's a constant effort then to make sure that the people who are supposed to be the guardians are beyond reproach themselves.
You got it. And it's an ongoing process that requires constant vigilance, a culture of accountability, and strong leadership that sets the right tone. For our UPSC aspirants, Understanding these internal dynamics is really important for analyzing how effective the CBI is and thinking about potential areas where they could improve.
And speaking of effectiveness, we can't ignore the criticisms that have been leveled at the CBI over the years. Things like accusations of political bias, the slow pace of investigations, even a lack of convictions in high-profile cases. How do these criticisms affect the CBI's credibility, how the public sees them?
Those are valid concerns.